Anyhow, we should probably move on to another robot-centric flick, which is Finch. Which one of you bad boys saw Finch?
I think we both saw it, but I will tell people about it.
I endorse this plan of action, Drew.
I'm glad to have your blessing. It means so much.
I'm sure.
In our last episode, we talked about Miguel Sapochnik's Repo Man, his only previous film directing credit. Since that film, he's made a really good name for himself in TV, in particular directing some notable action-heavy episodes of Game of Thrones, including The Battle of the Bastards and The Long Night. And before taking up his role as showrunner for the upcoming Game of Thrones prequel, House of the Dragon, he's been tempted back into film by this post-apocalyptic tale that's definitely not Short Circuit and Fallout. A particularly powerful solar flare 15 years ago destroyed most of the Earth's ozone layer, leaving much of the planet an irradiated, boiling, storm-torn hellscape. Humans are now scarce, thanks to the fact that stepping out unprotected into the sun will ensure you instantaneous burns, and all of that unfiltered UV having frazzled all of the plant life. Much of this suits Tom Hanks' Finch quite well. A misanthropic loner, Finch seems quite content to be the only human for hundreds of miles. But his will to survive continues, and he scavenges what little he can from the few unmolested stores of food left available. Mentally, he's kept going by his project to build a robot, not as a companion, but as a replacement, should anything to happen to him and there's no one left to look after his dog. His horrible, bloody cough absolutely does not suggest that there's a ticking clock on this. Normally holed up inside his former place of work in St. Louis in Missouri, an approaching superstorm, forecast to last 40 days and therefore meaning certain death if he stays, forces Finch to load up the not quite finished robot and the dog onto his RV and start heading west. Maybe San Francisco, which he's never visited, will be in better shape. The robot, voiced by Caleb Landry Jones and either through acting choice or sound processing effects, sounding in the early part of the film for some reason like a Russian Stephen Hawking. In Soviet Russia, AI robot creates you. Begins to learn at an incredible rate, though apparently not quickly enough for the irascible and cantankerous Finch, who is unreasonably angry and frustrated that his creation isn't immediately perfect. After 30 minutes, the robot, who has dubbed himself Jeff, trying to act human and understand the difficult concepts like metaphor, while getting into hilarious scrapes, was already beginning to wear a little. Sadly, this was also around the time I realised, oh, this is a whole thing, isn't it? The whole Earth is a wasteland thing almost becomes incidental after a while, with Finch settling into a groove of Chappie goes on a road trip. There's no jeopardy, no sense of danger. Once the road trip gets going, food magically stops becoming an issue. Where does the diesel for the RV come from? Well, it's just there, isn't it? But look at the silly robot and the cute dog. I realise now I've referenced both Chappie and Short Circuit, but they are the two obvious comparisons. And while they're the only two I can immediately bring to mind, I already feel that with them, the genre of advanced robot comically misunderstands humans before learning about them is already well enough served, and this film is extraneous. Not that it's bad per se, just unremarkable. It looks quite nice at points, and I'm struggling to find positives. It's fine, but it's hardly the road. There's good effects work on display. Jeff is an impressive amalgam of motion capture, CGI and puppetry, though for some reason I found the robot's constant round-shouldered hunching made me want to see it suffer in a press like the original T-800 in The Terminator. But good effects work is pretty much a given nowadays, and it needs to be in service of something, which it isn't here. Perhaps the one remarkable thing about Finch is Tom Hanks' performance. It begins by feeling like a very Hanksian performance, for better or worse, but I certainly didn't expect to end up hating a character played by him so much. Finch is an arsehole. That's there in the writing, of course, and much of it is explicable by the facts of Finch's situation. But even when playing a murdering mob enforcer, as in Road to Perdition, Hanks still somehow manages to make his character a genial, likeable murdering mob enforcer. Not so here, where his character is a git. I like it, because I don't like it. There's little else to recommend it though. Too bland, too safe, too mushy.
I guess I like this a bit more. I think primarily because I wasn't quite as annoyed with Jeff the robot as you were, which will go a long way if you're not if you're not quite as irritated by one of the two characters in it. Then yes, it's probably going to help with your overall enjoyment levels. But ultimately, I think this has been on the shelf for a few years, right? It's not something that's new. It has very much the feel of something that was made during coronavirus, kind of limited, on set people and all that stuff. But I don't think it has. I think it's been sat around for a while.
It was filmed in 2019, I think. So it's actually predates it. But it has that sort of feel because there's so few people.
Yeah, I can see why. Certainly why studios were not in a massive rush to release it, but also why a streaming service like Apple TV might want to pick it up, because it is pretty much perfect for fodder for these kind of things, because it's certainly nothing like objectionable enough for anyone to be annoyed by it. It's almost as though it's carefully calibrated to be right down the middle of the road in pretty much every aspect, and so it's exactly the kind of thing you can put on, and it kind of bulks out a service, and it's got the big names. Tom Hanks, it's a good performance. I'd probably watch Tom Hanks reading the phone book these days, so that buys a lot of goodwill, and I think if you'd cast almost anyone else in that role, then we wouldn't be talking about it at all, because it wouldn't have been of any interest whatsoever. I agree with you. It is fine. It's a fine film. It is a good bit of filler for both for streaming services and for if you got, what was this? This is another fairly short film as well. This can't be much more than 90 minutes if my memory serves.
That's 2 hours.
2 hours? Okay. It didn't quite feel it. I think it gets along well enough. You'll believe that that a dog can love a robot, if that's what its aim was. It's entirely inoffensive if you're a fan of Hanks or the kind of setting. It's worth a look, but yeah, I would not be beating down doors to get to it. Again, that's a good thing about streaming services. It's the kind of thing where I would never recommend anyone go to a cinema to see this, but if you already have Apple TV, then it's there. It's worth watching at least a bit of it to see if you get there, and that's a very easy recommendation to make. It's fine. I've seen much worse. I've seen much better. I'm not angry at it for existing or having taken up 2 hours of my time. So yes, it's not bad.
It's content procurement, isn't it? They bought a Tom Hanks film, as they showed they were willing to do previously with Greyhound, and it's no doubt competent enough. I don't know because I haven't seen it, but they've spent, I don't know, let's say $50 million to fill a thumbnail space on the front page of their streaming service. That's that, isn't it? And like you said, you weren't offended by it. No one's going to watch it, I imagine, and say, well, I demand my subscription fee back this month. So, yeah, literally, it fills a gap on a sector of a hard drive in a server somewhere, doesn't it?
It sure does. It sure does.
Yeah. See, I just find it frustrating. I just wanted like a bit more grit, and it would have done a lot more for me. But it's just sort of, it kind of ambles along. It's like, oh.
Yeah, there's that one scene where he's kind of recounting his little flashback of encountering a grocery store or whatever it was, and it could have done with a bit more of that, or the bit where the robots investigating the hospital, and it seems like something bad's going to happen, and it kind of just doesn't ultimately.
It doesn't really lead anywhere.
It kind of faints in that direction, but I think it just doesn't want to get too dark, because that might scare off people from it. So yeah, could do with a bit more of a opinion on things, really. Yeah.
I tell you one more thing it could do with as well. Drew, you obviously raised the spectre of short circuit, and I'm assuming that Finch probably wouldn't have been hurt by including more of Fisher Stevens blacking up and adopting an Indian accent. How come they don't show that film on network TV no more?
Do you know what's really weird? That's not going to be the first time Fisher Stevens is mentioned in this episode.
Whoa.
Bet that surprised you.
Whoa. This Fisher Stevens singularity is upon us.
Yes, but fortunately it has none of that. It only has 2 characters, really, if you don't count the dog, so we're spared that. And I suppose we're spared the fact that Apple TV Plus is track record on anything even vaguely sci-fi at the moment is considerably better than Netflix's. So there's that.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Foundation's bought them a lot of credit there. Whether you like the pace of it or not, let's compare that to the Cloverfield paradox.
Yes. Well, I mean, do you know what's really bought Apple TV Plus, and I guess everybody else as well, a lot of goodwill, is by simply not having the Cloverfield paradox or mute.
Yeah. For all mankind and Foundation, right? Everyone else can catch up with that for a while.